Hey, what's up traders? Welcome back to another lesson. In this lesson, I'm going to be explaining the latest changes I made to my ZenLibrary source code. Just some minor changes here. The most important one is that I've changed time filter, the time filter function. I've changed that to split it off into two separate functions. So now instead of just having one function that returns true if the bar is inside a given time session, we have bar in session, which returns true if the current bar is within the given time session, and bar out session, which returns true if the current bar is outside of the given time session. I've also added two new candlestick pattern functions, is inside bar and is outside bar. They do exactly what you think they would. If I hide these scripts here, let me find a good example here. Here's a great one. So is inside bar would be true on this bar here because this bar's high and its low is within the previous bar's high and low. So this would be a valid inside bar. And then the bar right after it is a valid outside bar. So this bar here would be a valid outside bar because its high and low is outside of the previous bar's high and low. So that's what these two functions do. And then finally, I've also added some Fibonacci functions. So bear fib and bull fib. So bear fib will return the Fibonacci ratio that you ask it to. So for example, we could get the bear fib from this high to this low of the 38.2% retracement. And what that function would do is it would take the high price that we give it and the low price that we give it and calculate this value or any other value. If we pass in a different ratio, it will calculate the price value between these two price points, the high and the low. And bull fib will do exactly the same thing, but in the opposite direction. So it will take a swing low and a swing high and calculate that same ratio as a price value. So let me quickly explain the source code to these functions. So if I scroll down here to, let's start with the Fibonacci functions. So here are my bull and bear fib functions. The function takes a price low as a float and a price high as a float, and then a Fibonacci ratio as a float. So fib ratio is the ratio you want to calculate. By default, it's set to the 38.2% retracement. To calculate the bullish Fibonacci, so from a swing low to a swing high, to calculate a ratio between these two numbers, we first subtract the high value from the low value, and then we multiply that resulting number by our fib ratio, and then we add the high value back on to whatever this value is. That gives us the price point of this Fibonacci ratio between these two prices. And for a bear fib, it's exactly the same thing, except that we flip our numbers around. So we're subtracting the price low from the price high and then adding the price low onto the end of this value. And that gives us our bearish fib, or a Fibonacci value between a swing high and a swing low. So that's our Fibonacci functions. Let's move on and find one of these other functions I added. That would be these guys down here, inside bar and outside bar. Inside bar is very simple. All we need to do is check if the current bar's high is less than the previous bar's high and the current bar's low is greater than the previous bar's low. Now, if you wanted to, you could make it less than or equal to and greater than or equal to. I personally prefer the inside bar to truly be inside and not have a low or high that's equal to the previous bar's high or low. But that's a matter of preference and how you like to trade and how much of a stickler you want to be for the rules of this candlestick pattern. But it shouldn't matter too much. I don't think changing that would detect that many more candlestick patterns. But anyway, it's the same for our outside bar, except the opposite operator is used. We're looking for the current bar's high to be greater than the previous bar's high and the current bar's low to be less than the previous bar's low. And that is our new candlestick pattern functions in the library. Let's go over the final two functions that I changed in our filter section, which is these two functions here. So bar in session takes a string as a session. So using my ultimate pullback strategy script as an example, if we scroll down here to this filter section here, if I was using this function in my library, which I do in this script, I need to pass in this session as a string, and it would look like this. 0600-0700 would check if the current bar falls within the 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. period of time. That's what I would pass into this session parameter. And then we also have a Boolean parameter here called use filter. Now by default, this is always set to true, which means it will always check if the current bar falls within this session. but you can override that in your script based on a user input, like this one here. So my script here passes in whether or not this box is ticked into this function, and if it is ticked, it will just return true. And if it's not ticked, meaning the user does not want to use the time session filter, then this check will just return true, because it's checking if the current bar falls within the given session or if use filter is false. So if use filter is false, then this filter will just return true, regardless of whether the current bar falls within the session. And it's the same for bar out of session, except instead of checking if this returns false, so remember what this is doing here is checking, if we read the description here, it says this time function returns the timestamp of the current bar for the specified time frame and session, or it will return NA if the time point is out of the session. So this function is checking if this function is NA, and if it is NA, then the current bar does not fall within the given session. And so this check here will return true if the current bar is within the given session. But bar out of session does not have this equals false check on the end. And so this function will return true if the current bar is not within this given session. One last change I made to the library script for version 4 is I added a new EAP stop loss function. And I'll just briefly explain what this does. The code is pretty self-explanatory here. All we're doing is first converting the ATR to a whole number. So if it's 0.0005 pips here on Eurodollar, that will turn it into 5 pips as a whole number. And that applies to all Forex pairs to kind of standardize the calculation. And then we just have these couple of if statements. If the ATR is below 40, we set our EAP stop loss to the current ATR plus 5 pips. And if the ATR is between 40 and 50 pips, we set our stop loss to the current ATR plus 10 pips. And if the ATR is between 50 to 200 pips, we add 20 pips. And then we just return that number converted back into pips so that it can be used to calculate a stop loss. So if I come up to the settings menu here, and I think I already have it on, and I do. But if I turn this off, keep an eye on our metrics up here, they will change just slightly. And depending on the market and time frame you're trading, the change can be quite significant. But this is completely optional. Again, this is just like the original EAP stop loss formula number 1. This is based on Stephen Hart's work. If you're not familiar with Stephen Hart, I'd recommend just staying away from these options, or at least make sure you understand what these formulas are doing. They're basically shrinking your stop loss a little bit in some circumstances. Algorithm number 1 reduces your stop loss a little bit in terms of its size, which allows you to have a slightly larger position, resulting in slightly bigger gains depending on how you trade the strategy. And algorithm number 2, depending on the pip range that the current ATR falls within, can either shrink your stop loss or expand it slightly. But anyway, that's just one more change to the script that I should mention. And that's it for this latest update to the Zen library. As always, the source code will be updated at the top of this category in the course, the Zen library category. You can check out the source code. It is very well documented. So if anything I just said didn't make sense, make sure to read through the documentation and play around with the code. That's the best way to learn, is by getting your hands dirty with just tweaking the code and seeing what happens. But anyway, if you want to use these functions in your own script, you will need to import ZenLibrary version 4. This latest update will change the version of ZenLibrary to version 4. So if you want to import it into your own scripts, you need to use import Zen and the Art of Trading /4 as whatever alias you want to use. And that will give you access to all of these functions in your own script and save you a bunch of time and a bunch of lines of code with using some of these functions in your own scripts. Anyway, that's all for this lesson. I'll speak with you in the next one. Take care. And as always, best of luck with your trading and, of course, your coding as well.